Dear loving children, welcome to the online class. Today we are going to have a revision of our history chapter 1, Making of the Global World. So before we start the revision of this chapter, I would like to remind the students that you must read the chapter 2 or 3 times thoroughly, because MCQ questions can come from anywhere from within the lesson. So if you have a thorough reading of the chapter only, you will be able to do those questions. The exam will be conducted in the Google form. Some questions will be MCQ questions. Some questions will be short answer questions, and some will be long answer questions. MCQ questions you will get automatic response. Short answer questions and long answer questions you should write down in the paragraph form and send it to the concerned teachers through their WhatsApp number. Once again I tell you my WhatsApp number: 9847831642. So after you write the exam, you should send your short answer and long answer through the WhatsApp number. Please write down neatly point wise and you should send it. And you should send it only one time. Don't send a student should not send more than one time the answer to the concerned teachers. So let us have a fast revision of this chapter, Making of the Global World. The pre-modern world, Making of the Global World, has a long history of trade, migration of people in search of work, movement of capital, all those things. So we know that so many people traveled in the beginning. In the beginning of the class, we told you there are so many people who traveled: the travelers, the traders, the priests, the pilgrims. They all traveled for knowledge, opportunity, spiritual fulfillment. They all traveled. So first we studied what is a Silk Route, a pre-modern vibrant trade that existed between Asia, Europe and North Africa. Silk routes over land and sea, knitting together. Knitting means connecting together vast regions of Asia, Europe and North Africa. We know that what all things they carried through Silk Route: from India, spices, India, China, Southeast Asia, Indian spices, textiles, Chinese pottery, etc. were taken to European countries and North Africa. And from there, we imported precious metals like gold, silver, etc. Along with that one, we can find food travel. Food travel to become noodles travel to become spaghetti in Italy. Some important foods like potatoes, soya bean, groundnuts, tomatoes, chilies were known to our ancestors. But these food items like potatoes, soya bean, groundnuts, maize, tomatoes, chilies came to introduced in Europe and Asia only after Christopher Columbus discovered America. So that is why we find how food traveled, how Arab merchants took pasta to other parts of the country, how noodles traveled to become a spaghetti in Italy. So how after the discovery of America, many food items came to Asia and Europe. Then we come to the next part, the conquest, disease and trade. How the Europeans conquered America, how they conquered Africa. The Indian Ocean was bustling, busy with the trade link. Expeditions to America brought back precious metals which enhanced the wealth of Europe. We know that from the mines of Peru and Mexico, silver was taken to Europe, which increased the wealth of Europeans. And conquerors also carried germs of diseases like smallpox, which was very deadly for the original inhabitants of America. We know when Portuguese and Spanish people, when they conquered America, they carried with them a disease called smallpox. The original inhabitants of America, the Mayas, the Incas and the Aztecs, they were not immune to this disease. As a result, a large number of people, original inhabitants of America, died due to smallpox, which paved the way for easy conquest of America. So, they used a biological weapon called smallpox. They can ask a question, which biological weapon was used by the Spanish and the Portuguese to conquer America? They used a biological weapon called smallpox. Then European sailors found a sea route to Asia and discovered America. Then goods, people, customs and knowledge were the few things due to which Indian subcontinent was famous for trading. So India became a center of trade. Many, I told you, spices, textiles were taken from India. A transformation followed after the discovery of America due to abundant lands, minerals and vast land. America had a vast fertile land, so there is a transportation change. We find 50 million people migrated to America from European countries. 50 million. Because we know that there was poverty, unemployment, religious persecution and sickness, overpopulation. All this forced 50 million Europeans to migrate to America. So America had abundant lands where they could establish a plantation agriculture, cultivation of sugarcane, wheat, etc. And in Peru and Mexico, precious metals were found, silver, especially silver, from the mines of Peru and Mexico. Europeans took silver to European countries and that helped Europeans to finance its trade. With that money, Europeans began purchasing many items from other parts of the world. Then who conquered America? We studied who conquered America. The Portuguese and Spanish conquest and colonization of America followed. And the weapon used by them, we already saw smallpox was a weapon used by them. So who conquered America? If there's a question comes, you can ask Portuguese and Spanish people conquered America with a weapon called smallpox. It spread into the continent ahead even of any Europeans reaching there. It killed and decimated whole communities, paving the way for conquest. The whole communities of original inhabitants of America, maybe the Mayas, the Incas and Aztecs, were killed by this disease called smallpox. So you find how the discovery of America, how from the mines of Peru and Mexico they took silver, which increased the wealth of Europeans, and how the Europeans conquered America. Now we find in the 19th century a world economy takes shape. First of all, we studied about what are corn laws. We studied corn laws are a series of laws which restricted the import of corn to Britain, and and the rich landlords of Britain introduced corn laws. Due to pressure from rich landlords, the corn laws were introduced. Then, why corn laws were abolished? Due to pressure of industrialists and urban dwellers. The corn laws were abolished. So when the corn laws were abolished, it was easier to import food into Britain more cheaply than it was produced in the country. So we studied what are corn laws. Corn laws are a series of laws introduced to prevent import of food grains to Britain. So the landed aristocracy, they put pressure. Landed farmers put pressure on the government, and corn laws were introduced. Then urban dwellers and industrialists put pressure on the government to abolish corn laws because prices of corn were increasing. So after the abolition of law, we have already studied, then food grains were coming from, it was coming from maybe from Australia, maybe from America, maybe from New Zealand, maybe from Russia or eastern part of Europe. So now food grains could be brought to European countries at a cheap rate. Now the British farmers, what was the impact of abolition of corn laws on the British agriculture? The farmers found it difficult to compete with the imports. So as a result, we find vast land was left uncultivated. Vast areas of land were left uncultivated, and thousands of people migrated to cities in search of jobs. Many people lost their jobs. So all this happened. Many people lost their jobs. Thousands of people migrated to cities in search of jobs. Vast land was left uncultivated. And as there was a fall in food price, consumption in Britain rose. People began to consume more food grains because the price came down. Higher incomes and food import in Britain led to a faster industrial growth. Because of the higher income, now people had more money to save. And because of food importing from other countries at a cheap rate, that led to a faster industrial growth. Then we have studied another question. Explain the role of technology. How technology changed the lives of people. We know that railways and steamships and telegraph invented, that helped a lot in connecting the world. And we have already studied that the role of technology, not only faster railways, we studied about lighter wagons, refrigerator ships, larger ships. So railways, we call it lighter wagons, faster railways, and refrigerator ships, larger ships enabled transport of goods from faraway place to final markets cheaply. So especially this refrigerator ships helped in the transport of perishable goods like meat. In the beginning, meat was very costly. Meat was a luxury item for the poor people of Europe, because animals were transported alive. But after the invention of refrigerator ships, we find animals were killed in America or New Zealand. Only frozen meat was exported. As a result, meat became cheaper. People began to eat a better diet and their health improved. So that is how the role of technology changed the lives of people. People began to eat a better diet. Meat became cheaper, and food grains could be imported from faraway countries like maybe Australia, America, New Zealand at a cheap rate. So people began to eat a better diet, the health of the people improved, people saved more, they could save more money. Technology helped the people in changing the lives of the people. So, late 19th century colonialism, European conquest of Asia and Africa, they conquered, Europeans conquered Asia and Africa as colonies. And we find why in 1885, why the Europeans gathered in Berlin. In the Berlin Conference Hall, the Europeans partitioned Africa. That is called a paper partition. How they carved Africa among themselves. Colonized societies were exploited economically, socially, and were brought into the world economy. So how this Africa were exploited by Europeans, how America was exploited by Europeans, how colonized societies were exploited economically, socially, and by these imperialist countries. Now we come to Rinderpest. What is Rinderpest? We studied. It is a fast-spreading cattle plague in Africa. It affected the fortunes of thousands of people. Before the arrival of Europeans, Africans were rich. There was no need for any African to work in the mines or plantations. They had plenty of cattle, and the Europeans came to Africa because Africa had vast resources, minerals, fertile land. All this attracted Europeans. So they want to establish plantations and mines in Africa. And the Rinderpest, it arrived in the 1890s. It arrived in Africa, and it spread like a wildfire, killing almost 90% of the cattle of Africans. 90% of Africans lost their cattle. They lost their means of livelihood, and they were forced to work in the mines and plantations. Because we have already studied that when Europeans reached Africa, they faced a problem of shortage of labor. And how they overcome that problem? They introduced taxes, they changed inheritance law. Only one member in the family can only inherit property. And as a result, because of the loss of cattle, Africans lost their means of livelihood. As a result, the Europeans got labor, and the Africans were employed in the mines and the plantation sites. Then we studied another problem. What is indentured labor? An indentured labor, he works for an employer for a specific period of time, and in return, he can either return back to his country, or he can move on to another country. So indentured labor. What forced people to migrate from India? We must understand India cottage industries declined, and the land taxes increased. Cottage industries declined. There was increase in taxes, and people were unable to meet basic needs of life. All these factors forced them to. There was no security of land tenure. All these factors forced the Indians to migrate to other parts of the world. We know, especially Indians from Orissa, Bihar, UP, and dry districts of Tamil Nadu. They migrated to Fiji Islands, Caribbean Islands, and various other parts of the world. Some of them went to Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and all that. So thousands of Indian and Chinese migrated as laborers in African mines and plantations and construction projects, railway construction projects, building up of ports, construction of roads, etc. What forced the people to migrate? I have already told you. Because of decline in cottage industries, the loss in the production of crops in the dry regions, because people became indebted, they fell into deeper debt, So they were forced to migrate in search of work. And these people were recruited by agents, and agents did not tell them the truth. They did not tell about the nature of job. They did not tell about the working conditions. They did not tell about their salary. They did not tell about their mode of travel. And all these factors were hidden from them. Sometimes agents forcibly abducted less willing migrants for their commission. We have already studied some of the great people, descendants of endangered labor migration in other countries. We have V.S. Naipaul, who was a very famous writer. We have Chandra Paul, Ram Naresh Sarwan. They were all best cricket players. They were the Indian descendants of endangered labor migrants. So, we have studied that question: what is endangered labor? What forced people to migrate to other countries? And what were the problems faced by the endangered labor? Working conditions were very poor, living conditions were very poor, they had few legal rights. Then, Indian trade, colonization, and global system. How it affected Indian trade. Fine cotton of India exported to Europe. In the beginning, fine cotton was exported to Europe, and we earned a lot of money from that one. Then what happened? Tariffs were imposed on import of cloth in Britain. A lot of taxes were imposed on Indian goods, Indian textiles which were imported to Britain. Indian textile faced stiff competition from the British mills. The raw cotton was exported to British cotton textile industries. Then, in the beginning, we were exporting fine cotton. Then we were exporting raw cotton. So we began to export more raw cotton, and we began to export raw cotton to British cotton textile industries, and they manufactured and sold finished goods back into our country. Indians were also asked to grow indigo and opium, which opium they sold in China. With that money, they purchased many items from China. Now let us come to the next point, that is Indian entrepreneurs abroad. Indian bankers and traders to finance export of agriculture in Central and Southeast Asia. We had some of the Indian entrepreneurs. We had people like, we studied about Shikaripuri Shroff, Natakote Chettiar, the Sindhi traders. And they developed a sophisticated system to transfer money over large distances. Established flourishing emporia at busy ports worldwide, selling local and imported curios to the travelers. So we find the Indian entrepreneurs abroad. We had some great businessmen, bankers, traders, like we have studied in the lesson, Natakote Chettiar, Shikaripuri Shroff, and the Sindhi traders. They borrowed some money from European banks, plus they had surplus money of their own. With that money, they began to finance export of agriculture in Central and Southeast Asia. Interwar economy. We find the First World War. The First World War was fought between allies. Allies on one side, Britain, France, Russia, and later and USA. The Central Powers, we have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Ottoman Turkey. Then, why the war that broke out in 1914 is called the First World War? Because many leading industrial nations took part in the war. Many modern machines were used. Tanks, machine guns, aircrafts, chemical weapons, etc. were used. That is why it is called the First World War. Millions of people died, and reducing the able-bodied workforce in Europe. The war transformed US from international debtor to international creditor. So US became an international creditor, and we find on the other hand, Britain became an international debtor. So the wartime changes we will find. Britain, a leading economy, faced a prolonged crisis. Britain, after the First World War, prolonged economic crisis. British had to suffer huge external debt. War led to an economic boom, but post-war led to unemployment. So, in agriculture after the First World War, wheat production fell in Europe and increased in Canada and America and Australia. The grain prices fell. Grain prices fell. Rural income declined, leaving the farmers into debt. So after the First World War, you will find agricultural overproduction, food grains coming from Canada, America, Australia, Eastern Europe, and the food prices fell down, and the rural income declined, leaving the farmers into debt. So that is the wartime changes. Before the First World War, Britain was economically stronger, but after the First World War, we will find Britain suffered a major economic crisis, and Britain suffered from huge external debt. War. On the other hand, America became an international creditor. Britain borrowed liberally from America during the First World War. Now we find in the 1920s you will find an assembly line method of production. The manner of production increased. In US, the war helped boost its economy. America was not affected by the First World War. So we find a new method of production was introduced, that is called assembly line method of production. This assembly line method of production was introduced by Henry Ford. He was a pioneer of mass production. He produced Ford cars in Detroit. Detroit in America is known as City of Cars. So Henry Ford, he was the pioneer in mass production. We studied that at the end of 3 minutes a car was ready. So it was each worker had to do a specific job. There was no time for break. There was no time for any break. The worker could not have a chat with his friends. He had to work mechanically, continuously. The speed of the work was decided by the conveyor belt. So the assembly line technique was successful, and this method was adopted by the European countries also. Credit system introduced to increase purchasing power. You can purchase things through EMI, EC, monthly installment. Higher purchase system was introduced. And you will find, when assembly line method of production was started, people began to get jobs. People began to get a nice salary, income. That led to a boom in housing and consumer goods. People began to invest money in the real estate. People began to buy houses. They began to buy consumer goods, car, washing machines, refrigerator, all those things people began to purchase, especially through the EMI system or hire purchase system. You can, through loan, everything is available. So that was system they introduced. And let us come to the World War II. The World War II was fought between, again, the Allies, Britain, France, Soviet Union and USA on one side. The Central Powers, we had, or we call it Axis Powers. Axis Powers or Central Powers, Nazi Germany, Italy and Japan on one side. And the Second World War was fought over land, sea and air. And it started in 1939 and ended up to 1945. 3% of the world's population was killed and millions were injured. And Two crucial influences shaped post-war reconstruction. Two crucial influences shaped post-war reconstruction. One is emergence of US as a dominant economical, political and military power in the world. So we find after the Second World War, before the First World War, we found that Britain was very powerful. But after the Second World War, we will find Britain's backbone was broken, and America became a leading economical, political, and military power. And second one, we find the dominance of Soviet Union and emergence of Soviet Union as a world power. So these two countries after the Second World War, America and the Soviet Union became superpowers of the world. Now let us find what steps were taken for rebuilding the world economy. After the Second World War, the Bretton Woods institutions were set up. A conference was held in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA, to deal with the external surpluses of its member countries. The post-war international economic system is known as Bretton Woods system. What is Bretton Woods system? The post-war international economic system. After the Second World War, the economic system that was developed is known as Bretton Woods system. This system was mainly based on the fixed exchange rates. So the Bretton Woods, the twins were born at New Hampshire in America. One is IMF, second one World Bank. IMF means International Monetary Fund, and World Bank, second one World Bank. The International Bank for World Bank is known as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. From the name itself we can understand the World Bank was set up for international reconstruction and development of the world after the Second World War. And IMF and World Bank were known as Bretton Woods twins. One is IMF, International Monetary Fund, second World Bank. So the IMF was set up for to deal with the trade surplus of its member countries. The member countries could deposit their surplus money in the IMF, and they would give loan to various other countries who had trade deficits. The only member in the beginning they helped only member countries. USA had a special right of veto over the key IMF and World Bank. Key decisions. Loan should be given to whom loan should not be given. America had a veto power, special power to decide whether loan should be given or not given. So America had a special power. Then we come to another term, that is what is New International Economic Order, NIEO, New International Economic Order. As most of the developing countries did not benefit from this World Bank and IMF, they organized themselves into groups called G77 to demand a new international economic order. So what was the aim? It was mainly a system that would give them a main control over their natural resources. It would give them a real control over their natural resources. It would have helped them a better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries. And we also studied that they would get financial assistance from other countries. So they would get financial assistance. They would give them natural control over their real control over their natural resources, a better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries. So we have already done this question. So that was the aim of NIEO. Some of the aims of NIEO. So here we have some questions just for testing. What does the Silk Route refer to? Okay. Just for your sake, first one or two questions I'll tell you. What does the Silk Route refer to? Present day West Asia, Introduction of humble potato, both A and B. I think the answer is westbound Chinese silk cargoes, which was fabled. The word is fabled. Fabled city of gold. Fabled. The spelling wrong. So fabled city of gold. We have Peru, Mexico, El Dorado, and Spain. You know, it is there in the textbook. You can find out. What technology helped in transporting perishable goods? The refrigerator aircrafts, the refrigerator railways, the refrigerator ships, both A and B. I think it is refrigerator ships. That way you can find out these answers. Some examples we have given you that you can do it, and you can find out the answer. Then complete the following statements with appropriate words. The famous economist Dash thought that the Indian gold export promoted global economic recovery. Who is that economist's name? Please go through the book and find out. The Bretton Woods Conference established the Dash to deal with the external surpluses and deficits of its member nations. You should know. Just before I told you. Dash movement was launched at the height of a Great Depression. The colonization of Africa was completed in 1885 and called a Dash. Called something like a paper partition. Thousands of people left Dash for Dash because of deadly diseases. So they left which place and left for which place because of deadly diseases. So please answer these questions, and plus you will have a short answer questions for exams, then long answer questions for exams. So study well, write the questions answers in points, and try to score above 80 marks. All the students should take your pre-midterm exam seriously, study well. I hope we had a quick revision of a chapter, Making of the Global World, and when you read the chapter you will understand more. I wish you all the best for your coming exams.